The member for Newtown Parents to the Legislative
Speaker.
Assembly Chamber.
Can I say that we've got Greens Bring Their Parents to Parliament Day, because also the member for Balmain's parents have joined us as well.
Welcome.
It seems the other MPs didn't get the memo that it was Family Day here in the Parliament today, but I acknowledge that our parents are indeed here. I rise to speak and contribute to the debate on the Protection of Environment Administration Balloons Bill, and acknowledge the wonderful work and absolute dedication and passion of my Greens colleague, the member for Balmain, and her team bring to this important bill. This bill seeks to amend the Protection of the Environment Administration Act 1997 to make it an offence to release any amount of lighter-than-air balloons into the air. Currently, the Act allows for the intentional release of up to 19 balloons outdoors without any penalty. If 20 or more balloons are released at once, the responsible actor is slapped lightly on the wrist with a $1,100 fine. This policy makes New South Wales an outlier amongst other states. In Victoria, Queensland and Western Australia, there is already a complete ban on the release of even a single lighter-than-air balloon, and the Northern Territory is poised to implement their own ban in 2025. There are certainly those in this place and beyond who will dismiss this bill and ask, how much harm really can a few balloons cause? And the answer is a lot. The reality is that we have, over generations, moved to a place where the idea of ditching stuff out of a car window or littering as you're walking down the street is completely unacceptable. And yet we are allowing people to distribute into the air elements that will indeed become litter with no punishment, with no sanction, and with absolute legality under the fact that this is still allowed. Balloons take hundreds of years to degrade, and they never do so fully. They just become smaller and smaller until they become microplastics that contaminate our soil and our waterways. Even so-called biodegradable balloons that end up as litter or as landfill take decades to degrade and contain toxic additives that make their way into the environment, where they wreak havoc on ecosystems and human health. In 2019, a joint study between the CSIRO and the University of Tasmania Institute for Marine and Antarctic Studies found that balloons are in the top 3 most harmful pollutants threatening marine wildlife, alongside plastic bags and bottles. And so we ask, and I just wanted to refer to the comments made by the Shadow Environment Minister now and member for Manly, as someone that I know is very passionate about marine conservation and very passionate about ensuring that marine wildlife is protected, as well as the beauty of our oceans, that is one of the reasons why the Greens are bringing this separate bill. Because, and I'll repeat, that study found that balloons are in the top 3 most harmful pollutants threatening marine wildlife, alongside plastic bags and bottles. It's not to say that we do not want comprehensive reform in terms of single-use plastics. It's not to say that there is not a whole lot more that this New South Wales state Labor government could be doing to protect our waterways and our natural environment, but we absolutely want to see movement on the fact that this is one of the 3 most harmful pollutants under this study. Balloons are 32 times more likely to kill marine animals than hard plastics when ingested by seabirds, turtles, and other marine life. In her second reading speech, the member for Balmain shared harrowing accounts of marine life undergoing immense suffering, in some cases fatal, after ingesting balloon waste. We heard of the painful death by suffocation, drowning, or starvation that too often results from dolphins, whales, turtles, and seabirds mistaking a balloon for prey, or becoming tangled in a balloon, ribbon, or string. Now, it's worth noting that I appreciate that kids love balloons, and I know that the member for Balmain and I both have young children who absolutely love a balloon. The reality is, though, that those children and the younger generation also love our beautiful oceans, our waterways, and are probably the strictest in paying attention to not littering in our natural environment or causing harm to animals. And so I think if we change the perception around the release of balloons and the damage that single-use plastics are doing, then absolutely the younger generations will already be on board with ensuring that we are not doing harm and causing harm. And instead, we are positioning this as something that is seen as a lovely celebratory thing to do, when in actual fact the harm that is being caused is significant. And we heard how 2 marine bird species known to be significantly impacted by balloon debris, the fresh-footed shearwaters and the short-tailed shearwaters, are now classified as near threatened and population decreasing respectively. Is this the world that we want to create for future generations? Is the suffering something that we are willing to accept for a few short-lived seconds of joy of releasing a balloon into the air? As the member for Balmain acknowledged, balloons have some sentimental items that are associated with birthdays and other celebrations, but there are so many other ways that we can mark these occasions and celebrate in a way that doesn't cause environmental and wildlife risks. It is disappointing to hear that the New South Wales Labor government is going to oppose this bill, particularly because when they were sitting in opposition, we heard them in so many ways urging for more action on single-use plastics. But as the former member for Balmain used to say, we see a very different Labor Party in opposition than we do a Labor Party in government. And that's why it's so great, Speaker, and I'm sure that you will agree that we have such a strong crossbench in this Parliament. I note that the member for Blue Mountains, speaking of the government's position on this bill, mentioned that the New South Wales Plastics Next Step paper released by the New South Wales Environment Protection Authority in October last year, and that the EPA is currently reviewing public feedback to this paper. I also note that this same paper included the suggestion to, and I quote, phase out the release of helium balloons as well as accessory items such as plastic balloon sticks and ties. While the Greens absolutely recognise the need to allow this review process to play out, it is disappointing that we are yet to receive any firm indication of a timeframe for this review response, nor any concrete action from the Labor government nearly 1 year on, and we are urging them to act. And it is something that is resonating across the community. Just on the weekend, I was door knocking in Surrey Hills, and the primary concern raised to me by one of those residents in Surrey Hills was the fact that councils have failed to be able to address the recycling of soft plastics. And sadly, in the City of Sydney, we've seen that the soft plastics recycling and the FOGO recycling process have been stalled. And in part of that, it is because of the fact that we know that the state government and the federal government have failed to step in to ensure that there's adequate end of the recycling process practice is in place. And it shouldn't be, absolutely our local councils need to do more, but it shouldn't just be up to local councils to have council by council solutions to these things. The state government has a critical role to play, and legislating to ensure that there is stronger response to ensuring that soft plastics are recycled is a key part of that. The Greens will continue to stand with the environmental and animal justice activists to push for this important change. And I want to thank again my Greens colleague, the member for Balmain, for bringing this important legislation to the chamber, and recognise that there is multi-partisan support in this House for taking these actions. But sadly, there is not the strong leadership from anyone within the New South Wales Labor government to take a stance on delivering this. I feel absolutely certain that if we looked across this chamber, across political divides, we would all agree that single-use plastics, that the release of balloons into the air without any penalty is not something that any of us would support, because we know there are other ways to celebrate birthdays, to celebrate other occasions. But instead what we have is yet again an example where we have a New South Wales Labor government that disappointingly is in a situation where they probably all know that this is the case, but it's like they've forgotten they're now in power to change things for the better. And so we're here to remind the New South Wales Labor government that we are here to encourage them to do what they know is right, to take further action in the banning of single-use plastics. The Labor government can absolutely work with us, and we hope that they will, to be able to deliver this reform and other reforms to ensure the protection of our environment and others. And finally, can I just say to the opposition and the member for Manly that it's all well and good to say that they don't want a piecemeal approach and they want to see some genuine change on this and they're not supporting it because it's just one. I mean, the logic of that is really bizarre. It's sort of like, oh, we'll back you in if you do it all, but we won't back you in if you just do one bit at a time. Well, I mean, you know, we could bring one bit at a time of every bill, of every piece of single-use plastic, or we could do it comprehensively, or the government could act. But right now before us, we have a bill by the member for Balmain that has identified one of the three most damaging types of plastic to our marine life as a result of studies have found, and that is to ban the use of single-use balloons, lighter-than-air balloons being released into our environment. And I think that it is shameful and disappointing that the opposition is not backing us in relation to this, particularly when we know the member for Manly is so passionate about the idea of marine and water protection. And so I would say to the opposition that if you do want action on the things that the Greens are advocating for, the best way to force the government to act is to back us in when we have sensible bills like this that are going to deliver for the people of New South Wales and our environment.
The question is, the